Hi, Reddit. This is a confession. Long, messy, and hopeless. My name is Jacob. I'm 39, and for the last 7 of those years, I've been living in a hell of my own making, built from the noblest materials. Love, loyalty, and grief. My wife, Lily, died of aggressive leukemia. The illness took her in 9 months, from the first unexplained bruise to the last ragged breath in hospice. I was with her every day. I held her hand. I promised I would love her always. I kept my word, and it became my death sentence. This isn't a story about how I can't let go. It's a story about how I refused to let go, and how that refusal systematically killed the man, the friends, the career, and even the memory of her within me, turning her into a monument that crushes me with its granite weight. The first 2 years were a socially sanctioned pit. People brought me food, told me to hang in there, allowed me to be unhappy. Her things stayed in their places. The perfume on the dresser, the robe on the hook in the bathroom, her favorite, world's best wife, mug in the cupboard. I couldn't throw away a single sock. Every discarded item felt like a betrayal, another small death of her in this world. My home became a museum, and I its curator and sole exhibit. I worked remotely, thankfully. I'm an IT architect, and my world shrank to the square meters of our apartment. I talked to her photo, told her about my day, asked for advice, pretending to hear an answer in the silence. I celebrated her birthday by lighting a candle on a cupcake, marked our wedding anniversary by opening a bottle of the wine we bought in Tuscany. I lived by rituals, like a monk in the order of grief. My friends, frequent visitors at first, came less often. I pushed them away myself. Their lives moved forward. Weddings, children, career leaps. Their happiness became unbearable for me. It was a living reproach, a reminder that the world goes on when mine froze in 2017. When Mike, my best friend, for the 100th time cautiously suggested going somewhere, maybe fishing, I snapped. I don't have the mental energy for that, Mike. Not everyone's life is that simple. He never offered again. The grief stopped being acute. It became the background noise of my life, its fundamental tone. I became an expert in my own unhappiness. I read books on grief, attended a support group for widowers where we sat in a circle and measured our suffering like Olympic medals. My sorrow was the purest, the most faithful. After all, I wasn't trying to replace it. I wore it like a uniform. Work became mechanical. I turned down promotions that required relocation or greater involvement. I have family circumstances, I'd say. Meaning my dead wife. I used her as a shield against the world. It was then that I began to notice my memory of Lily changing. I consciously purged it of anything inconvenient. I forgot how we could argue fiercely about politics. How she sometimes got angry with me for scattered socks and forgetting to buy milk. How once, after a stupid fight, she went to a friend's place for the night. In my memory, she was becoming not a flesh and blood person, but an idealized saint. Always kind, always understanding, always radiant. This version was safer. It was easier to maintain a one-sided relationship with her. The outside world began to seem hostile and vulgar. Advertisements with happy families, couples in cafes, laughter on the street. It all hit raw nerves. I set up social media filters to avoid seeing wedding and baby photos. My feed became a graveyard. Only memorial posts, philosophical quotes about loss, and news about breakthroughs in oncology. In the 5th year, I was introduced to Eva, a new employee in our department. Smart, witty, with a light, infectious laugh. We worked on a project together. She was the first person in years I could talk to not about loss, but about code, a new series, the absurdity of corporate policy. I caught myself looking forward to her Slack messages. That during calls, I listened not only to her ideas but to the timbre of her voice. Once, working overtime, we ordered pizza. Sitting in the empty office, she asked, "Jacob, are you anything besides a workaholic? Do you have hobbies? Friends?" The question felt like a gut punch. I mumbled something about a difficult period. She looked at me for a long time and said, "Seems like that period has stretched into a lifetime." That night, I returned to my museum apartment, looked at Lily's photo, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel the cozy, bitter sadness. I felt shame. Shame for that spark of interest that flickered in me when talking to another woman. It seemed to me that the expression on Lily's face in the photo had changed, become reproachful. I said out loud, "I'm sorry. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a colleague." and I believed it. But avoiding Eva became harder and harder. She was persistent in her friendliness, sent funny memes, suggested going to a concert of some band I didn't know. I refused each time, coming up with elaborate excuses. But a civil war raged inside. One part of me, frozen, screamed about betrayal. Another, tiny and almost suffocated, whispered, "I'm still alive. I want to hear that stupid band." The war was decided by Eva. She came to my house. Unexpectedly. Said she was in the neighborhood. Seeing her on the threshold of my mausoleum, I felt animal terror. "Come in," I whispered. She entered and stopped dead in her tracks. Her gaze slid over the walls covered with Lily's photos, over her things neatly arranged as if she'd just stepped out to the store. Over that very mug on the shelf. "My God, Jacob," she said quietly. You don't live here. You're standing guard." She didn't say anything else. Turned and left. The next day, she wrote on Slack, "I'm sorry I barged into your personal space. But, Jake, what I saw, that's not love. That's torture. For you and for her memory." A week later, she transferred to another department. Her departure, or my expulsion of her, was a turning point. I didn't feel relief. I felt a crushing, definitive defeat. I chose the safety of my crypt over the possibility of breathing. I made a choice, and that choice finally determined my fate. After Eva, something in me broke for good, but not loudly, quietly, like an overloaded beam giving way. I stopped fighting, stopped even pretending there was anything other than this museum. Work became a pure formality, a way to pay the electricity bill so the photos of Lily in the digital frame would always be lit. I stopped cooking, lived on delivery left at the door so I wouldn't have to see the courier. The world shrank to a laptop screen in the apartment walls. The physical space began to reflect the internal one. I no longer cleaned with the meticulousness of a curator. Dust accumulated on her things. A barely noticeable gray film appeared on that very mug. At first, it caused panic. I tried to wipe it off, but my hands shook. Then I resigned myself. Let it gather dust. Let everything gather dust. I began neglecting myself too. Shaving once a week. Clothes. The same worn cotton sweater and sweatpants. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not a widower, but a ghost slowly dissolving in the shadow of someone else's memory. My rituals grew darker. On the next anniversary of her death, I didn't just light a candle. I set her photo on a chair opposite, set the table for two, laid out her plate, poured wine into her glass. I spoke to her out loud, asked questions, and answered for her in a quiet, fake voice. This was no longer a conversation with a memory. It was full-blown psychosis, a one-man play where the actor had forgotten where the stage ended and life began. It was at this moment that her sister, Claire, visited. We hadn't seen each other in over a year. When she entered, her face reflected not grief but shock and disgust. The air in the apartment was stale, smelling of must and loneliness. "Good God, Jacob, what have you done to yourself?" I shrugged, looking past her. Living. She walked into the living room, saw the dusty mug, unwashed dishes, me, unwashed, in dirty clothes. Then her gaze fell on the set table with two place settings and the photograph. Her eyes filled not with sympathy but with horror. This isn't normal anymore, Jake. Lily wouldn't have wanted this. Do you understand that? She would cry seeing you like this. Those words sounded like blasphemy. You don't know what she wanted. I roared, and my voice, long unused to volume, was hoarse and foreign. I knew her better than anyone. I made a vow to her. Claire shook her head, and there was something new in her look, not grief but resolve. You vowed to love her in sickness and in health, till death do you part. Death parted you, Jacob. It fulfilled its part of the contract. You didn't. You refused to live, and you're turning her into some kind of idol, an excuse for your own cowardice. She left, slamming the door. Her words hung in the stagnant air, poisonous and unbearable. An excuse for your own cowardice. I smashed the glass that was set for her on the table. But even in that gesture, there was no catharsis, only pathetic, helpless rage. The incident with Claire became a crack in the foundation of my reality. I couldn't get her words out of my head. She would cry seeing you like this. I began, for the first time in 7 years, not just to remember Lily, but to examine her. Not the saint on the altar, but the living woman. And memories surfaced. Not just the trip to Tuscany, but that fight over the milk. Not just her gentle laugh, but her irritated grumbling when I forgot to take out the trash. Her fear of the illness and her anger at the world's unfairness. Her humanity. And with that came a realization more terrifying than any other. I had forgotten her. The real her. I had buried the living, complex, real Lily under a mausoleum of my own grief and self-flagellation. I hadn't been preserving her, I'd been preserving my pain. I clung to the suffering because it had become all I had left. It was my identity. Jacob, the widower. Faithful Jacob, the one who couldn't move on. And then, 3 days ago, the final blow landed. Adding insult to injury, my laptop broke. My only bridge to the outside world, my source of income. The panic was absolute. All the files, all the work. And among them, the folder, Lily. Thousands of photos, scans of our notes, her voice messages, everything I had left of that other, digital memory. In hysterics, I took the laptop to the first repair shop I found. The guy, a hipster with a nose ring, looked at it and said gloomily, "Hard drive, man. Most likely, the files might be recoverable, but it's expensive and not guaranteed. Let's run diagnostics." I spent 2 days in absolute hell. The thought of losing those digital relics pushed me to the edge. I paced the apartment, my eyes darting to every physical object as if they, too, might escape. I didn't sleep. Yesterday, the repairman called. Diagnosis confirmed. HDD is dead. But there's a chance. There's a data recovery service. The price is around $1,000. I didn't have $1,000. My savings had dwindled over the years of stagnation. The despair was icy and bottomless. And then, in that despair, my gaze fell on it. On that very mug. World's best wife. It stood on the shelf, covered in dust, like everything in this house tomb. And it hit me with a clarity that took my breath away. What was I trying to save? A digitized shadow? Moments frozen in JPEGs that I myself had devalued by turning them into icons? I had killed the living memory of the woman I loved, and now I was frantically clinging to her digital ghost because even losing that was terrifying. I walked to the shelf, took the mug in my hands. The dust left prints on my fingers. I felt no reverence, no sorrow. Only fatigue, an infinite, bone-deep fatigue. And then I did it. Not with sobs, not with a scream, but with a quiet, almost dispassionate click in my mind. I raised my hand and hurled the mug onto the kitchen tile floor. It shattered. Not beautifully, not dramatically. Just broke into dull, unremarkable shards. White porcelain with blue letters. Worldsby lay on the floor. I waited for a wave of grief, guilt, panic to wash over me. Nothing, only silence. A resonant, deafening silence, far emptier than before. Because before, the silence was filled with her absence. Now it was filled with nothing. Absolute emptiness. I didn't call the data recovery service. I left the apartment for the first time in weeks. Just stepped outside, stood on the porch, and the November wind burned my face. It was cold, sharp, alive. I looked at the bare trees, the passing cars, a woman walking her dog. The world was ugly, noisy, imperfect, and insanely, incredibly alive. And I understood the most horrible truth. Lily died 7 years ago. But I died somewhere along the way. And by breaking that mug, I wasn't burying her. I was burying that Jacob who decided to die with her. The one who chose the role of a professional mourner over the risk of living, feeling, making mistakes again. Who used her saintly image as a shield against the fear of the future. Now I'm here. I'm 39. I've broken the last fetish. I have no money to recover the hard drive. No strength for the job I might have already lost. No friends. No identity. I'm not the faithful widower. I'm just an empty space. A man who spent 7 years building a perfect prison from his own loyalty and now, standing in the ruins, doesn't know where to go and only remembers how to be a prisoner. But when I look at those shards on the floor, for the first time in 7 years, I don't see betrayal in them. I see liberation, not hers, mine, gruesome, lonely, and 7 years too late. And the first step in this liberation isn't cleaning up the shards. The first step is standing here, in the cold wind, learning to breathe this living, prickly air again. Air that smells not of pain, nor of the past, nor of dust. It just is. And it seems, am too.